You should not trust that thing, Nora. It will kill you one day, just like it killed those villagers. The words came from Marcus, the Beta's son, his voice dripping with the same contempt she had heard her entire life. Nora did not turn to face him. She kept her eyes on the massive creature before her, its dark fur rippling like shadows given form, its eyes glowing with an intelligence that most of the pack refused to acknowledge. The beast lowered its head, allowing her small hand to rest between its ears, and she felt the familiar hum of connection that had always existed between them, unexplainable and absolute. "He has never hurt me," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the crowd gathering behind her. "He has never hurt anyone who did not deserve it." The laughter that followed was cruel and sharp. It cut through the morning air like claws through flesh. Nora had learned long ago not to flinch at that sound. She had been the strange one, the broken one, the Omega who talked to monsters instead of finding a proper place in the pack hierarchy. Her wolf had never emerged, not during her first shift ceremony, not during any of the subsequent attempts. The healers had declared her defective. The pack had declared her worthless. Only the creatures of the deep forest had ever looked at her like she mattered. Leave her alone, Marcus. If she wants to die playing with demons, that is her choice. That was Vivian, one of the pack's most celebrated warriors, her voice bored and dismissive. Nora heard the footsteps retreating, heard the whispers and snickers fading into the distance, and finally allowed herself to close her eyes. The beast, which the pack had named Shadowmaw out of fear and ignorance, pressed closer to her side. She could feel his concern through the bond they shared, a bond she had never asked for, but had learned to cherish. "They will never understand," she whispered against his fur. "And I am tired of trying to make them." The creature rumbled, a sound too low for human ears, but one that vibrated through her entire body. It was agreement. It was protection. It was a promise that she was not as alone as the pack wanted her to believe. She had been sitting there in the forest clearing for perhaps an hour when the horns began to blow. 3 sharp blasts, the signal that important visitors were approaching Silverwood territory. Nora's heart sank. Visitors meant ceremonies, meant the pack putting on their best faces, meant she would be expected to make herself scarce so as not to embarrass Alpha Garrett with her presence. Shadowmaw growled, his massive body tensing beside her. "I know," she murmured, running her fingers through his dark fur one last time. "I should go back before they send someone to drag me away from you." But the beast did not relax. If anything, his agitation grew stronger, and Nora felt it through their bond, a warning that made her skin prickle with awareness. Something was wrong. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. She made her way back to the pack village slowly, Shadowmaw following at a distance as he always did, staying just within the tree line where the others could not see him clearly. The village was in chaos. People running between houses, the Omegas frantically preparing food and decorations, the warriors polishing weapons and armor. Nora slipped through the crowds like a ghost, practiced at being invisible. She had almost made it to the small cottage she shared with 2 other unmated Omegas when a hand grabbed her arm roughly. "Where have you been?" It was Beta Thomas, Marcus's father, his face twisted with irritation. "The Alpha King is coming, and we cannot have you wandering around looking like some forest vagrant. Get cleaned up and stay in your house until the ceremonies are over. Do you understand?" Nora nodded, not trusting her voice. The Alpha King. She had heard stories about King Davian Blackthorn, the most powerful werewolf in all the territories, a warrior who had united the fractured packs under one rule through both diplomacy and unmatched strength. He was coming here, to Silverwood, a pack so small and insignificant that they barely registered on most maps. "Why is he coming?" she asked softly, immediately regretting the question when Beta Thomas's grip tightened painfully on her arm. "That is none of your concern. Now go." He shoved her toward her cottage, and Nora stumbled but caught herself. She could feel Shadowmaw's rage through their bond, could sense him preparing to emerge from the forest, and she quickly sent him a pulse of calm, of reassurance. Not now. Not for this. He would only make things worse. Inside the cottage, her roommates were already dressed in their finest clothes, their hair elaborately braided. They barely glanced at her as she entered. "Try not to embarrass us tonight," said Petra, the older of the two, examining her reflection in a polished silver mirror. "The Alpha King is bringing his entire court. There will be unmated males of high rank. Some of us actually have a chance at a better life." Nora said nothing. She moved to her small corner of the single room they shared, pulled out the one decent dress she owned, a simple gray thing that had belonged to her mother. Her mother, who had died when Nora was 6, taking with her all the answers to questions Nora had never known to ask. Why could she communicate with animals when no one else could? Why? Had her wolf never emerged? Why did she feel like there was something vast and powerful sleeping inside her, waiting for a key she did not possess? She cleaned herself with water from the basin, braided her long dark hair in a simple plait, and put on the gray dress. When she looked at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror on the wall, she saw what she always saw. Plain features, too thin, eyes too large and too strange, a color that shifted between green and gold depending on the light. Nothing special, nothing worth noticing. Certainly nothing that would interest an Alpha King or his court. The ceremony was held in the great clearing at the center of the village, where a massive bonfire had been built and torches lined the perimeter. Nora stood at the very back of the gathered pack, as far from the center as she could manage while still being technically present. She watched as Alpha Garrett and his Luna, along with Beta Thomas and the high-ranking families, formed a reception line. And then the visitors arrived. The Alpha King's warriors came first, 24 of them, each one radiating power and discipline. They moved in perfect formation, their armor gleaming in the firelight, their eyes scanning the crowd with professional assessment. Then came the nobles, males and females in elaborate clothing, their wolves so close to the surface that Nora could feel the pressure of their dominance even from her position at the back. And finally, the Alpha King himself, Davian. Blackthorn was taller than any male Nora had ever seen, his shoulders broad and powerful, his presence so overwhelming that the air itself seemed to compress around him. His hair was dark as midnight, his eyes a startling silver that seemed to glow with inner light. He wore black leather and armor, and at his side was a sword that legend said had been forged in dragonfire and quenched in the blood of his enemies. He was magnificent. He was terrifying. And when his eyes swept across the gathered pack, Nora felt the strangest sensation, as if something inside her recognized something inside him. But his gaze passed over her without stopping, without even pausing. And she told herself she was a fool for imagining anything different. The formalities began. Alpha Garrett welcomed the king with flowery speeches about honor and loyalty. The king responded with words about unity and strength. Food was brought out, music began to play, and the pack began to relax into celebration. Nora tried to slip away, to retreat to her cottage where she would not be noticed. But she had barely taken 3 steps when a hand landed on her shoulder. She turned to find Lady Cassandra Nightshade, the king's cousin and rumored future queen, looking at her with beautiful, cold eyes. "You are the one they call the Beast Whisperer, are you not?" Cassandra's voice was smooth as silk, and just as dangerous. She was stunning, with pale blonde hair that fell in perfect waves and a dress that probably cost more than Nora's cottage. Behind her stood 2 other noble ladies, their expressions ranging from curious to disgusted. "I am Nora," she replied carefully, not confirming or denying the title. Cassandra smiled, and it did not reach her eyes. "How fascinating. I have heard that you keep company with monsters. Tell me, is it because no wolf would have you, or do you simply prefer the company of beasts?" The ladies behind her giggled. Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "I do not keep company with monsters, my lady. I simply do not fear the creatures of the forest as others do." "How brave," Cassandra said, her tone making it clear she meant the opposite. "Or how foolish. But then, what can one expect from an Omega who cannot even shift?" You are aware that the king has come to investigate the attacks on our territories, are you not? Perhaps you should inform him about your pet monster. Unless, of course, you have something to hide. The implication was clear, and Nora felt anger flare hot in her chest. Shadowmaw has nothing to do with the attacks. He has been with me for years, and he has never harmed anyone from the pack. Shadowmaw, Cassandra repeated, her perfect eyebrows rising. You have named it. How precious. And you expect us to believe that a creature of darkness and violence is innocent? You expect the Alpha King to take the word of a defective Omega over the evidence of entire villages destroyed? Before Nora could respond, a deep voice cut through the conversation like a blade through silk. Is there a problem here? The Alpha King stood 3 paces away, his silver eyes fixed on Cassandra with an expression that was impossible to read. The noble ladies immediately curtsied, their heads bowed in submission. Cassandra's smile widened, became warmer, more intimate. No problem at all, cousin. I was simply making conversation with one of the local pack members. This is Nora, the girl they say communicates with the forest creatures. I thought she might have information relevant to your investigation. King Davian's gaze shifted to Nora, and the impact of his full attention was like being struck by lightning. She forced herself not to look away, not to show the fear and strange attraction that warred inside her. Is this true? He asked, his voice deep and controlled. Do you communicate with the creatures that have been attacking our territories? I communicate with many creatures, Your Majesty, Nora said, keeping her voice steady. But not the ones responsible for the attacks. The creature I know would never harm innocent people. The creature you know, he repeated, taking a step closer. You speak as if there is only one. There is only one that matters, she said, and then immediately regretted her honesty when she saw Cassandra's triumphant expression. The king studied her for a long moment, his eyes seeming to look past her physical form and into something deeper. What is your name? Nora Ashwood. Your Majesty. Nora Ashwood, he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. Tomorrow morning, you will take me to this creature you claim is harmless. If what you say is true, you have nothing to fear. If you are lying, or if you are protecting something that has killed my people, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand? Nora's mouth went dry, but she nodded. I understand. Good. He turned back to Cassandra, his expression cooling noticeably. I think it is time we return to the festivities. The Alpha has prepared entertainment. He offered his arm to Cassandra, who took it with a possessive grace, and the two of them walked back toward the bonfire. The other ladies followed, but not before shooting Nora looks that promised future trouble. Nora stood frozen, her heart pounding. Tomorrow morning. She had to take the Alpha King to meet Shadowmaw, the creature who terrified everyone, who had been blamed for countless disappearances and deaths, who was the only friend she had ever truly had. If this went wrong, they would both die. She slipped away from the celebration as quickly as she could, ignoring the music and laughter, ignoring the sounds of the pack enjoying themselves. She ran through the darkened paths between cottages, ran past the cultivated gardens, and into the wild forest beyond. She did not stop until she reached the clearing where Shadowmaw waited, his massive form a deeper darkness against the night. They are coming for you, she gasped, falling to her knees beside him. The Alpha King is coming tomorrow, and if he decides you are dangerous, he will kill you. We need to run. We need to leave now, tonight, before they can stop us. But Shadowmaw did not move. He lowered his great head and touched his nose to her forehead, and through their bond, she felt his response. Calm, certainty, trust. He was not afraid of the Alpha King. He was not planning to run. And somehow, impossibly, Nora understood that tomorrow was not about judgment, or tomorrow was about truth. A truth that had been buried for so long that even the forest had almost forgotten it. She wrapped her arms around Shadowmaw's neck and let the tears come. Tears of fear and frustration, and a terrible, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, Everything was about to change. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Sleep did not come easily that night. Nora lay in her narrow bed, listening to Petra and the other Omega breathing deeply in sleep, while her own mind raced with possibilities and fears. What would happen when the Alpha King saw Shadowmaw up close? Would he attack immediately? Or would he give her a chance to explain? And what exactly could she explain? That she had found the creature as a wounded pup 5 years ago, bleeding and half dead at the edge of the forest. That she had nursed him back to health despite knowing what he would become. That their bond had formed not through magic or ritual, but through simple kindness and trust. None of it would matter if the king had already decided Shadowmaw was guilty. And Cassandra's words echoed in her mind, poisonous and persistent. The king was here to investigate attacks. Villages had been destroyed. People had died. If Shadowmaw was blamed, if the king believed the creature was responsible, nothing Nora said would save him. She was nobody. She was a defective Omega from an insignificant pack. Her word meant nothing against the judgment of an Alpha King. When the first light of dawn crept through the small window, Nora rose and dressed in her plainest clothes, sturdy pants and a worn tunic suitable for the forest. She braided her hair tightly and splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the exhaustion and fear. Outside, the village was just beginning to wake. Nora could smell bread baking, could hear the early risers beginning their daily tasks. She walked toward the Alpha's house, where she had been told to meet the king, and found him already waiting. He stood in the courtyard, dressed in dark traveling clothes, his sword at his side, and 2 of his warriors flanking him. When he saw her approach, he dismissed the warriors with a single gesture. "You will take me alone," he said, his voice allowing no argument. "If this creature is as harmless as you claim, we will not need an army." Nora swallowed hard and nodded. "Follow me, Your Majesty." She led him out of the village and into the forest, taking the familiar paths she had walked 1,000 times. The king moved behind her with silent grace, his presence a constant weight at her back. They did not speak. The only sounds were their footsteps on the forest floor, and the morning songs of birds in the canopy above. As they went deeper into the woods, Nora began to feel Shadowmaw through their bond. He was awake, waiting, and surprisingly calm. She sent him a pulse of reassurance mixed with warning. "The Alpha King is with me. Do not attack. Do not threaten. Please, please be careful." The response she received was complex, layered with emotions she did not have words for. But beneath it all was that same strange certainty, that same inexplicable trust. They reached the clearing as the sun broke fully above the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. And there, in the center of the clearing, Shadowmaw waited. He was enormous, easily the size of a full-grown horse, with fur so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His eyes glowed with that eerie intelligence, fixed on the Alpha King with an intensity that would have sent most wolves running. Nora heard the king's sharp intake of breath, heard the whisper of steel as his hand went to his sword. "Do not," she said quickly, stepping between them. "Please, Your Majesty. He will not attack unless you do." "That," the king said slowly, his voice tight with control, "is no ordinary beast. That is a Shadowborn, a creature from the ancient times, from before the packs were unified. They were supposed to be extinct." Nora blinked in surprise. "Shadowborn?" "They were the guardians of the old magic," the king continued, his eyes never leaving Shadowmaw. "Bonded to powerful bloodlines, serving as protectors and companions. But they were hunted to extinction centuries ago because people feared their power. How is this possible? How is one here, and how are you bonded to it?" "I do not know," Nora admitted. "I found him injured 5 years ago. I helped him heal, and we have been connected ever since. But I never knew what he truly was. The pack just called him a monster." The king took a step forward, and Shadow Maw's lips pulled back slightly, revealing teeth like daggers. But he did not growl, did not attack. If he is truly Shadowborn, the king said carefully, then he is not responsible for the attacks. Shadowborn do not kill indiscriminately. They do not destroy villages. They protect. They guard. They serve their bonded partner with absolute loyalty. Nora felt relief flood through her so intensely she nearly collapsed. Then you believe me? You believe he is innocent? I believe he is not the creature we are hunting, the king corrected. But that raises more questions than it answers. Who are you, Nora Ashwood, that a Shadowborn would bond with you? These creatures only bond with those of ancient bloodlines, with those who carry the old magic in their veins. You claim you cannot even shift. You claim you are a defective Omega. Yet you have achieved something that has not been done in 300 years. Before Nora could respond, Shadow Maw moved. He crossed the clearing in 3 massive strides and positioned himself between Nora and the king, his body tense and ready. Through their bond, Nora felt his sudden alarm, his protective fury. "What is wrong?" she asked, her hand going to his fur. "What do you sense?" The king's expression changed, his entire demeanor shifting from curious to deadly in an instant. "We are not alone," he said quietly, his sword sliding free of its sheath with a sound like a promise of violence. "We are being watched." The attack came from 3 directions at once. Creatures burst from the tree line, and Nora's heart stopped. They looked like wolves, but wrong, twisted, their forms corrupted by something dark and unnatural. Their eyes glowed red instead of the natural gold or amber of true wolves, and their movements were jerky, puppet-like, as if something else was controlling them. "Get behind me," the king ordered, moving to place himself between Nora and the attacking creatures. But Shadow Maw was faster. The great beast lunged forward with a roar that shook leaves from the trees, meeting the first corrupted wolf in midair. They collided with brutal force, teeth and claws flashing in the morning light. The king moved like lightning, his sword a silver blur as he engaged 2 more of the two creatures. Nora watched in horror as more kept coming, pouring out of the forest like a nightmare made flesh. 6, 8, 10 of them, all focused on the king, all moving with that same unnatural coordination. She understood with sudden terrible clarity. This was an ambush. Someone had known the king would come here. Someone had set a trap, and she had led him right into it. One of the creatures broke past Shadow Maw's guard and lunged for the king's exposed back. Nora screamed a warning, but she knew it would not be fast enough. The king was engaged with 2 others, his attention divided. The creature's jaws opened wide, aiming for his neck. Shadow Maw moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. He abandoned his own fight, leaped across the clearing, and caught the attacking wolf in his jaws. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the forest. The creature dissolved into black smoke, revealing that it had never been truly alive at all. Shadow magic. The king snarled, dispatching another corrupted wolf with brutal efficiency. "Someone is using forbidden magic to create these things. Someone wants me dead." He fought with a skill that took Nora's breath away, his sword moving in patterns too fast to follow, his own wolf rising so close to the surface that his eyes began to glow silver. But there were too many. Even with Shadow Maw fighting beside him, tearing through the shadow creatures with savage efficiency, the king was being driven back, surrounded, overwhelmed. Nora felt something building inside her, something vast and powerful and terrifying. It was the thing that had always been there, sleeping, waiting. The thing that had never awakened even during her shift ceremonies. It responded to the king's danger, to Shadow Maw's desperation, to her own fear and fury. Without thinking, without understanding what she was doing, Nora opened herself to it. Power exploded out of her like a shockwave. It rippled through the clearing in high, visible waves of golden light, and where it touched the corrupted wolves, they simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not defeated, erased. The clearing fell silent. The king stood frozen, his sword still raised. staring at Nora with an expression of absolute shock. Shadowmaw's presence in her mind was filled with fierce pride and satisfaction, as if he had been waiting for this moment since the day they met. Nora looked down at her hands and saw them glowing with that same golden light. She could feel the power thrumming through her veins, could feel it connecting her to the earth beneath her feet, to the trees around her, to every living thing in the forest. And she could feel something else, something that made her knees weak with the implications. A bond. Not like the one she shared with Shadowmaw, but something infinitely more powerful, more intimate, more permanent. A mate bond, connecting her to the Alpha King. Impossible, the king whispered, his sword lowering slowly. You are not Omega. You are not defective. You are a guardian, the first one born in 3 centuries, and you are my mate. Nora opened her mouth to respond, to deny or confirm, or simply ask what any of this meant. But the world tilted sideways, and darkness rushed up to claim her. The last thing she felt was strong arms catching her before she hit the ground, and Shadowmaw's reassuring presence promising that everything would be all right. When she woke, she was no longer in the forest. Nora's eyes opened to unfamiliar surroundings. She lay in a bed softer than anything she had ever felt, in a room larger than the entire cottage she had shared with the other Omegas. Rich tapestries hung on stone walls, and through a large arched window she could see the Silverwood village below, looking small and distant. She was in the Alpha's house, in one of the guest chambers reserved for visiting nobility. The door opened, and a woman entered carrying a tray of food. She was older, with kind eyes and the bearing of a healer. "You are awake," she said, setting the tray on a table beside the bed. "That is good. You have been sleeping for nearly a full day." The king was beginning to worry. "The king," Nora repeated, memories flooding back. The attack, the corrupted wolves, the power that had exploded out of her, the mate bond. "Where is he?" "Dealing with the aftermath of yesterday's events," the healer said carefully. "There is much to discuss, but first you need to eat and regain your strength. What you did, the power you released, it drained you completely. You are lucky to be alive." Nora sat up slowly, accepting the bowl of broth the healer offered. "What happened after I collapsed?" "The king carried you back to the village himself. The Shadowborn followed, which caused quite a panic until the king ordered everyone to stand down. He has declared that the creature is under his protection, that anyone who harms it will answer to him personally. He has also confined Lady Cassandra and 3 others to their quarters under suspicion of treason." Nora nearly dropped the bowl. "Treason? What do you mean?" The healer's expression grew grave. "The attack was not random. Someone used forbidden shadow magic to create those creatures, and someone knew exactly where the king would be and when. The only people who knew he was going into the forest with you were those he told at breakfast. Lady Cassandra, Lord Marcus her brother, and 2 council members. All of them are now under investigation." The implications made Nora's head spin. Cassandra had tried to have the king killed, had tried to have her killed, and had planned to blame it all on Shadowmaw. But why? The healer shook her head. "That is for the king to determine. Now eat. You need your strength." The broth was rich and warming, and Nora realized she was ravenously hungry. She ate everything on the tray while the healer bustled around the room, and when she was finished, she felt almost human again. "Can I see Shadowmaw?" she asked. "I need to know he is all right." "The beast is fine. He has been sitting outside this very building since the king brought you here. Nothing and no one can convince him to move." The healer smiled slightly. "The guards are terrified, but the king finds it amusing." A knock on the door interrupted them, and one of the king's warriors entered. "The king requests Lady Nora's presence in the Great Hall, if she is well enough to attend." "Lady Nora?" she repeated, confused. The warrior's expression remained neutral. "The king's orders. You are to be addressed as Lady Nora from this moment forward." The healer helped her dress in clean clothes, not the fine gowns the noble ladies wore, but simple, well-made garments that fit properly and did not smell of another person's sweat. Someone had even found boots that actually fit her feet. When Nora looked at herself in the polished mirror, she barely recognized the girl looking back. The great hall was filled with people when she entered. The entire Silverwood pack leadership was there, along with the King's Court and warriors. Alpha Garrett sat in his ceremonial chair looking distinctly uncomfortable, while Beta Thomas stood beside him with an expression of barely concealed panic. And at the center of it all, seated in a chair that had been brought in for the occasion, was King Davian Blackthorn. His silver eyes found Nora the moment she entered, and she felt the mate bond flare to life between them, warm and electric and undeniable. He stood as she approached, and everyone else in the room immediately rose as well. "Nora Ashwood," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Please come forward." She walked toward him on trembling legs, acutely aware of every eye on her, of the whispers that had already started. When she reached him, she started to curtsy, but he caught her hand and stopped her. "You bow to no one," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Not anymore." Then louder, addressing the room. "Yesterday, this woman saved my life. She revealed powers that have not been seen in generations, powers that mark her as one of the ancient guardians, blessed by the old magic itself. She is also my mate, chosen by fate and recognized by my wolf. As such, she will be accorded the respect and honor due to the future queen of all packs." The silence that followed was absolute. Nora heard someone gasp, heard the rustle of fabric as people shifted in shock. Future. Queen. The words did not feel real. "Your Majesty," Alpha Garrett said carefully. "Forgive me, but are you certain? Nora has always been, that is, we believed she was unable to shift, that she was defective." "She is not defective," the king said coldly. "She is a late bloomer, something that happens occasionally with ancient bloodlines. Her wolf was sleeping, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment came yesterday when she needed to protect those she cared about. The power she displayed, the ability to destroy shadow creatures with pure life magic, is proof of her heritage." He turned back to Nora, his expression softening slightly. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you have questions, and you deserve answers. But first, there is a matter of justice that must be addressed." He gestured, and guards brought forward 4 people in chains. Cassandra, her brother Marcus, and 2 males Nora recognized as minor nobles from the King's Court. All 4 looked furious and terrified in equal measure. "These 4 conspired to have me killed," the king said, his voice hard as iron. "They used forbidden shadow magic to create corrupted creatures, knowing that the blame would fall on the Shadowborn and by extension on Nora. They planned for me to die in that forest, and for Cassandra to claim the throne as my closest living relative. But they made several critical mistakes." He began to pace, his movements controlled and dangerous. "First, they underestimated the Shadowborn. They thought it was just a beast, when in fact it is an ancient protector of incredible power. Second, they underestimated Nora, assuming she was a weak Omega when she is actually a guardian. And third, they left evidence. Shadow magic leaves traces, and we found those traces in Lady Cassandra's chambers, in a hidden compartment containing spell components, and a journal detailing the entire plot. Cassandra's composure finally cracked. "You cannot prove anything. That could have been planted. I am your cousin, Davian. Your family." "You are a traitor," he said flatly. "And you will be tried and sentenced according to pack law. Guards, take them to the cells. We will hold a formal trial tomorrow." As the guards dragged the screaming, protesting conspirators away, Nora felt the entire room's attention shift back to her. She wanted to run, to hide, to find Shadowmaw and disappear into the forest where things made sense. But the king's hand was still holding hers, warm and steady, anchoring her in place. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. I know you are frightened, he said quietly, for her ears alone. I know this is not the life you imagined, but you are my mate, Nora. I felt it the moment I saw you yesterday, even before I understood what you truly were. And now that I know, now that I have seen your power and your courage, I cannot imagine anyone else by my side. I do not know how to be a queen, she whispered. I barely know how to be a person. The pack has treated me like garbage my entire life. Then they were fools, he said simply. And they will learn to see what I see, what your Shadowborn has always seen, that you are extraordinary. He raised his voice again, addressing the room. From this moment, Nora Ashwood is under my personal protection. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any harm done to her will be answered with my personal vengeance. I suggest everyone here adjusts their perceptions accordingly. Alpha Garrett cleared his throat nervously. Of course, Your Majesty. Silverwood Pack is honored to have produced such a remarkable individual. We always knew there was something special about young Nora. The king's expression could have frozen fire. Did you? Is that why she lived in a cottage with 2 other Omegas, dressed in cast-off clothing, and was mocked by your pack members for her bond with the Shadowborn? Is that why Beta Thomas felt comfortable grabbing her, roughly, and ordering her to hide during my visit? Do not lie to me, Alpha Garrett. I have eyes and ears throughout your pack, and I know exactly how Nora was treated. The Alpha's face went pale. Your Majesty, I apologize if there were any. That is, we did not realize. We could not have known. You could have treated her with basic kindness, the king interrupted. You could have protected her from cruelty. You chose not to. I will deal with that failure later. For now, I have more important concerns. He looked back at Nora, and his expression softened again. Will you walk with me? There is much we need to discuss, and I would prefer to have that conversation in private. Nora nodded, not trusting her voice. They left the great hall together, ignoring the stares and whispers, and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. True to the healer's word, Shadowmaw sat in the courtyard, his massive form drawing nervous glances from passing pack members. When he saw Nora, he stood and approached, lowering his head so she could embrace him. I am all right, she murmured against his fur. Thanks to you. The king watched their interaction with fascination. May I? He asked, extending a hand slowly toward the Shadowborn. Shadowmaw regarded him with those glowing eyes, and Nora felt the creature's assessment through their bond. After a long moment, he allowed the king to touch his head, a gesture of acceptance and respect. Magnificent, the king breathed. In all my years, I never thought I would see one of the ancient guardians. Your bond with him is remarkable, Nora. It speaks to the strength of your bloodline. I still do not understand, Nora said. What am I? What is a guardian? Let us walk while I explain, he said, offering his arm. Nora hesitated only a moment before taking it, and they began to stroll through the village with Shadowmaw following at a respectful distance. 300 years ago, the king began, there were families blessed by the old. Magic, the power that existed before the werewolf packs formed, before civilization as we know it. These families could communicate with all creatures, not just wolves. They could heal the land, purify corruption, and channel pure life energy. They were called guardians, and they served as mediators between the natural world and the world of thinking beings. What happened to them? They were hunted, he said grimly. During a period of great upheaval and fear, people became suspicious of those with different powers. The guardians were blamed for disasters they had nothing to do with, accused of consorting with dark forces. Most were killed. The few who survived went into hiding, and their bloodlines were thought to have died out. But clearly at least one line survived. You think I am descended from these guardians? I know you are, he said. The power you displayed yesterday, the bond with a Shadowborn, the fact that you have never shifted into a wolf, all of it points to guardian heritage. Your wolf is not absent, Nora. You are simply not meant to have one. You are something older, something more rare and precious. They had reached the edge of the village, where the cultivated gardens gave way to wild forest. Nora stopped and looked out at the trees, at the world she had always felt more comfortable in than among her own kind. "If what you say is true," she said slowly, "then why did my mother never tell me? Why did she let me grow up thinking I was broken?" "Perhaps she did not know," the king suggested. "If the bloodline had been dormant for generations, she might not have realized what you were. Or perhaps she knew and was trying to protect you. Being a guardian in hiding would require absolute secrecy." Nora thought of her mother's face, the few memories she had left. Had there been secrets in those eyes? Had there been fear? "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we prepare for the future," he said. "The attacks on our territories are not over. Whoever is creating the shadow creatures, it was not just Cassandra and her conspirators. They were working with someone else, someone with real power and knowledge of forbidden magic. We need to find out who, and we need to stop them before more innocent people die." "And you think I can help?" "I know you can," he said firmly. "Your power is the natural counter to shadow magic. Life against death, light against darkness. Together, with your Shadowborn and my strength, we have a chance to end this threat. But there is something else we need to address first." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "The mate bond between us is real, Nora. I felt it before I knew what you were, and it has only grown stronger. But I will not force you into anything. I will not demand that you accept me simply because fate has drawn us together. You have spent your entire life being told you are worthless, being pushed around and dismissed. I will not be another person who takes away your choice." Nora's heart hammered in her chest. She looked up at him, at this powerful, magnificent male who could have anyone he wanted, who ruled over all the packs, who had just declared her his future queen in front of everyone. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why would you want someone like me?" "Because you are brave without knowing your own strength," he said. "Because you showed kindness to a creature everyone else feared, and earned its loyalty. Because you stood between me and danger, without hesitation, even though you barely know me. Because when I look at you, I see not what you have been, but what you are meant to become. And because my wolf has never been more certain of anything in my entire existence." He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite his obvious strength. "I am not asking you to love me today. I'm not even asking you to accept the mate bond right now. I am asking you to give us a chance. Let me court you properly. Let me show you what it means to be valued, to be treasured, to be seen for who you truly are. And if, in time, you decide you want this bond, I will claim you with joy. But if you decide you do not, I will respect that decision, even though it will destroy me." Nora could feel the truth of his words through the bond. She could feel his sincerity, his desire, and beneath it all, a loneliness that matched her own. He was a king, but he was also a man who had never found his equal, who had been surrounded by schemers and social climbers like Cassandra his entire life. "I want to try," she said softly. "I want to give us a chance, but I need time. I need to understand what I am, what this power means. And I need to know that you see me, Nora, not just the guardian or the mate bond. I see you," he promised. "I will always see you." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed his lips to her forehead in a kiss that was both chaste and somehow more intimate than anything Nora had ever experienced. The mate bond flared between them, golden and warm, and she felt her power respond to his, felt the way they fit together like two pieces of a puzzle she had not known was incomplete. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing silver with his wolf's presence. "My wolf wants to know if he can meet yours," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Even if you do not shift into wolf form, you still have a wolf spirit. He can sense her, and he very badly wants to say, 'Hello.'" Nora closed her eyes and reached inward, to that place where she had always felt empty and broken. But now, instead of emptiness, she found a presence. Not a wolf exactly, but something similar. Something ancient and powerful and patient. Something that had been waiting for this exact moment. When she opened her eyes, she knew they were glowing with golden light. "She says hello," Nora whispered, and the king's answering smile was brilliant and genuine and completely, utterly beautiful. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, at the edge of civilization and wilderness, two souls who had been broken and lonely, finding completeness in each other. Shadowmaw rumbled his approval, and somewhere in the distance, birds began to sing. For the first time in her entire life, Nora felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. The formal trial of Lady Cassandra and her co-conspirators was swift and damning. The evidence against them was overwhelming, from the shadow magic components found in their quarters to testimonies from servants who had seen them practicing forbidden rituals. All four were stripped of their titles and sentenced to life imprisonment in the highest security facility in the kingdom. But the trial revealed something more disturbing. Under interrogation, Marcus broke and confessed that they had been contacted by an unknown benefactor, someone who had provided them with the knowledge and materials for the shadow magic in exchange for their cooperation in killing the king. This mysterious figure called themselves the Shadow Master, and according to Marcus, they had agents throughout all the territories, working toward some larger goal that the conspirators had not been privy to. The revelation sent shockwaves through the king's court. If there was truly an organized force using shadow magic and working to destabilize the kingdom, the threat was far greater than anyone had imagined. King Davian immediately ordered his most trusted warriors to begin investigating, searching for any signs of shadow magic or suspicious activities in the territories. Meanwhile, Nora found herself thrust into a world she had never imagined. The king assigned her a suite of rooms in the Alpha's house, far grander than anything she had ever dreamed of. He provided her with clothing suitable for her new station, though he noticed her discomfort with elaborate gowns and ensured she also had practical travel. Clothes. He introduced her to his council, his warriors, his most trusted advisors, making it clear that she was to be treated as his equal in all things. And through it all, he courted her with a patience and attentiveness that took her breath away. He asked about her childhood, her memories of her mother, her experiences with the pack. He listened without judgment when she described the years of loneliness and mockery, and his eyes blazed with quiet fury when she spoke of the worst incidents. He shared his own story in return, of becoming king at 19 when his parents were killed in a territorial dispute, of the weight of responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders, of the isolation that came with absolute power. They discovered shared interests, surprising commonalities. Both loved the quiet hours of early morning, both found peace in nature, both valued loyalty above all other qualities. He taught her about pack politics and territorial management, while she showed him how to sense the natural energies in the land, how to communicate with creatures beyond wolves. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Shadowmaw became a constant presence, accepted by the king's warriors after an initial period of wariness. The great beast seemed to enjoy his new status, often sprawling in the courtyard and intimidating visitors with his mere presence, though he remained gentle and protective with Nora. On the fourth day, the Thabai, King asked Nora to accompany him on a journey. "Where are we going?" she asked, as they prepared to depart, just the two of them and Shadowmaw, leaving the warriors and court behind. "I want to show you something," he said. "Something I think you need to see to truly understand what you are." They rode for half a day, heading deep into the mountains that bordered Silverwood territory. The king was an excellent rider, and he had chosen a gentle mare for Nora, patient and calm. Shadowmaw loped alongside them, clearly enjoying the exercise. As they climbed higher, Nora began to feel something strange in the air, a vibration that resonated with the power inside her. The king noticed her reaction and smiled. "You feel it," he said. "The old magic is stronger here, in places that have been untouched by civilization. We are getting close." They crested a ridge, and looked down into a hidden valley. What Nora saw made her gasp. The valley was filled with life, but not the normal forest. Growth she was used to. These trees glowed with subtle luminescence, their leaves shimmering with colors that did not exist in nature. Flowers bloomed in impossible combinations, and the very air seemed to shimmer with energy. And among the trees, she could see creatures, not corrupted shadow beasts, but pure magical beings. Deer with antlers of living crystal, foxes whose fur shifted through the colors of sunset, birds that left trails of light in their wake, a massive bear whose eyes held ancient wisdom. "This is a sanctuary," the king explained quietly. "One of the last places where the old magic still runs pure and strong. It has been protected by my family for generations, kept secret from those who would seek to exploit or destroy it. And now, I am sharing it with you." He dismounted and helped her down, and they walked into the valley together. The moment Nora's feet touched the ground, she felt it. A connection, profound and undeniable, to every living thing around her. The trees recognized her. The creatures turned to look at her not with fear, but with welcome. The power inside her sang in harmony with the power of this place. "This is what you are meant to protect," the king said. "This is the legacy of the Guardians. Not just wolves, not just one pack or one territory, but all of life, in all its forms. The balance between civilization and wilderness, between progress and preservation." Tears streamed down Nora's face as she felt the truth of his words. This was her purpose. This was why she had always felt more comfortable with creatures than with people. This was why Shadowmaw had found her, why the forest had always called to her. She was meant to be a bridge between worlds. One of the crystal deer approached her cautiously, its delicate hooves making no sound on the grass. It lowered its head, and Nora reached out to touch it. The moment of contact sent a pulse of pure joy through her entire being. "How do you know about this place?" she asked. The king. "My grandmother was a friend to the last known guardian," he said. "She told me stories when I was a child, brought me here and made me swear to always protect it. I never thought I would find another guardian in my lifetime. I certainly never imagined she would be my mate." He moved to stand beside her, his presence warm and solid. "This is why I need you, Nora. Not just because of the mate bond, not just because of your power, but because the kingdom needs a guardian again. The shadow magic we are facing, the corruption and destruction, it is the opposite of what you represent. Life against death, growth against decay, and I cannot fight it alone." Nora looked up at him, at this magnificent king who had given her everything, who had seen value in her when no one else had. "You are not alone," she said firmly. "You will never be alone again. I accept the mate bond, Davian. I choose you, not because fate demands it, but because my heart does." The joy that flooded his expression was breathtaking. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, properly this time, and the mate bond between them blazed into full life. It was like nothing Nora had ever experienced, a connection so deep and complete that she could feel his emotions as if they were her own, could sense his wolf recognizing hers, could feel the rightness of two souls finding their other half. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, the entire valley seemed to glow brighter. The creatures had gathered around them in a circle, witnessing and celebrating their union. Shadowmaw sat at the edge of the clearing, his eyes glowing with satisfaction. "I love you," the king said, his forehead resting against hers. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing at the back of that gathering, trying to be invisible. I will love you until my last breath, and I will spend every day proving myself worthy of you." "You already are," Nora whispered. "You already are." That night, they camped in the sacred valley, and the king taught Nora the rituals of claiming that would formally establish their bond in the eyes of pack law. It was beautiful and profound, a blending of two souls into one partnership while still maintaining their individual strengths. When it was complete, When the claiming marks had been exchanged and the vows spoken under the stars, Nora felt more powerful than she ever had. Not because of magic or bloodline, but because she was no longer alone. They returned to Silverwood the next morning to find the village in chaos. More attacks had occurred during their absence, this time hitting 3 different territories simultaneously. The shadow creatures were becoming more organized, more deadly, and the casualties were mounting. "It is time," the king said grimly, reading the reports his warriors had compiled. "We need to take the fight to them, find this Shadow Master, and end this threat before it grows any stronger. And I need you with me. My guardian, my queen. Will you stand by my side?" Nora looked at the reports, at the descriptions of destruction and death, and felt her power rising in response. She thought of the sacred valley, of all the innocent creatures who would suffer if the shadow magic was allowed to spread. She thought of the packs, of the families torn apart by these attacks. "I will stand with you," she said. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after. We will find this Shadow Master, and we will stop them. Together." The king smiled, fierce and proud, and pulled her close. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." As they began to plan their campaign, as warriors gathered and strategies were formed, Nora felt the weight of her new responsibilities settling on her shoulders. She was no longer the unwanted Omega, the strange girl who talked to monsters. She was a guardian, a queen, a force for life and protection in a world threatened by darkness. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. The war against. The shadow magic would be long and difficult. There would be battles and losses, sacrifices and pain, but there would also be love and loyalty, purpose, and belonging. For the first time in her life, Nora had a family. She had a mate who saw her true value, a Shadowborn who would die to protect her, and a kingdom that needed what only she could provide. As she stood beside King Davian, looking out at the gathered warriors ready to follow them into battle, she felt no fear, only determination, only certainty, only hope. The girl they had mocked for trusting a wild beast had become the woman who would save them all, and it was only the beginning. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?